Up with Ola. This is Mojola Lua, and I'm super thrilled to be here and to have you over there watching this session. In this session, we want to talk about a typical build, operate, and transfer agreement and how to review it. This is good for laymen if you are a company that specializes in PPPs, that's public private partnerships. So if that's what you do in your company, this is good for you. If you're a law student too, it's good for you to understand it. Essentially, the things we're going to be talking about are things that you can apply to any general contract, to a large extent. And if you're a lawyer, you probably already know about this, so it's probably just a refresher course. And if it's not something that you do in your own practice, it's good to know one or two things about it too. Build, operate, and transfer. I I remember several years ago when I first walked into uh, my very first build, operate, transfer facility. I mean that I first encountered an actual facility, and I knew and I was told that this facility is a build, operate, and transfer project. So it was my uncle that taking me to that facility. The facility is owned by um, a chief in Ibadan. So, it's an hostel that was built for the University of Ibadan. So my uncle took us there and he was explaining that, oh, this is the agreement we have with Chief. Chief is going to run this place for 20 years, make his money back. He's going to be letting out this hostel to this certain type of people, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, he's going to revert to the University of Ibadan. So that was my first understanding of what a build, operate, and transfer uh, facility or project is. So essentially, as the name may imply, build, operate, transfer, BOT in commercial circles. A build, operate, and transfer project is a PPP model. That's a public-private partnership model that allows a private entity to partner with the government or with a government establishment, agency, company, institution, to build something of value, something that is going to be publicly used, a public facility. They will build it from their own pocket with their own money, then they will operate it for a certain number of years before the ownership transfers to the government. So essentially, maybe this is the government and this is my private company. So government needs maybe a government university needs a school hostel. The school hostels they have are not sufficient, for the number of students that they currently have. So they need a school hostel. They don't have money. They don't have a budget for it, and they don't know how else to raise funds or whatnot. There's just some difficulty in building that hostel. Now, I am a private company. This is what we do, PPPs. So I will approach the university and then say, oh, I can build this hostel for you. It's going to cost so and so amount. This is the design that I have in mind. And this is the number of students that will be able to accommodate. This is the type of facility that we're talking about. I'll build it from my pocket with my money. Just give me land. So you just give me land in the school for me to build the hostel in. So land that belongs to the school. So I'll build it on the land and then I'll run the hostel for maybe 15 years or 20 years or 30 years. So I'll make my money back, the money that I used to build the hostel. Then the hostel will now become your own permanently going forwards. So that is you build, you operate, then you transfer. That is what happens. So it can be used for different types of projects. It can be used to build railways, it can be used to build roads, it can be used to build bridges, it can be used to build, so many other things, public facilities, buildings, hostels, whatnot. Things that would most likely generate an income for the government. But the government is not at the present time able to fund the project. So an outsider, a private entity will come fund the project, build it, construct it, operate it, and make their money back, and then transfer it in its entirety back to the government. So that is what a build and operate and transfer agreement or project is. Now it has its own pros and cons. The pros are that government is able to get a facility that they need. Hi Zena, government is able to get a facility that they need in good time. They're able to get it when they need it. For instance, let's say the value of the naira is at a certain amount today. and we need to build, this road. If we don't build it now, maybe in the next 10 years, the value of the naira will be at a certain value that we will not even be able to afford to build that road. A company is now offering to build the road for us and to make their money back from tolling and tariffs. It's a win-win because we are going to have the road in good time. Sometimes the general public, hello, Augustine. So, he said, I senior counsel. I'm assuming you're a lawyer. Hello, counsel. Thank you very much for joining the channel. So essentially, we're able to get the facility that we need. Sometimes the general public will not even know how the road came by or the building came by or the bridge came by. They'll just think that, government is doing well. They're building bridges, they're building roads, they're building this and that. But the private company knows that we are the one funding this, we are the one building this, and we're going to make our money back. But it's going to give the government a good name. Government will get the facility they need in time. It will also give the society the facility that it needs in time. So that's some of the pros. Also, it helps a company to be able to contribute positively to the society, to do good work. Also, whatever the company has built or constructed goes into their portfolio. So if they want to secure some other contracts in the future or to do some other large scale project, they're able to say, we've done this, we've done that. If you go to this state, this is what we've done there. If you go to this institution, this is what we've done there. So win-win. Also, what it also does is that it's able to, like I have said, minimize cost, against edge government expenditure, against inflation, and all the vagaries of economic weather in the sense that, what they might have suffered had the project been delayed, they do not now have to suffer it since a private entity is offering to do it in time. Now, what are the cons? The cons is that for the government, by the time the facility is returned to them for ownership, it may have been dilapidated. The better part of it might have been used, and exploited by the private company. Another con is that political instability, which affects both parties now, especially the private entity. So, for instance, if government A approves and gives you land, say, go and build this public facility that we need. Government B may come when you are in the middle of building it and resign the contract in its entirety. So what about the monies that you've expended? And they say, we are not going to assign you this contract. We're going to give it to another contractor. Or we're not even interested in this project for now. Stop work, stop work. We want to use land for something else. So it's a very volatile field, but it can be for and against both parties. Also, on the part of the company, because you're able to construct a public facility, you're able to make money from a sure and a standard source. If you're building a school hostel, for instance, like I've cited the example, there's a certainty that government schools will be populated, students will come, and you will make your money. There's a certainty if you are building a public facility that the public will use it, you'll make your money. So you don't have to go and look for the market, the target market. It's like the government already provides the target market that will use the facility, that you will be able to make your money. If you're building road for the government now, the general public will be passing the road. You make your money from tolling. So you just put a toll gate and then you're able to make your money. It's not necessarily to say that you'll be able to make all your profit in good time or in totality. What I'm saying is that it takes the burden of looking for the target market off you as a private entity. So there are pros and cons of both sides. But now let's look at when you have negotiated and you have reached the point of signing an agreement, or you are still discussing the contract between both parties, government and private entity. What are some of the things you should look at? So if, for instance, you are the lawyer on one side, what are some of the things you should look at in the contract? Of course, it's important for you to look at the parties clause, very important. That will state the people that are entering into the contract. Of course, the government is always almost certain that this is the person entering into the contract. So, but you must also ensure that the government is entering into it in its legal entityship, not that maybe the person that is there. So if you're signing a contract with a school, for instance, you are not doing business with the VCO. You are doing it with the school in the name in which the school can sue and be sued. And as a private company too, you must be a registered company, and you must enter into the contract in the proper names, by which you can sue and be sued. It must be two legal entities entering into the contract. I put some other things down that I'm going to be looking at, and we're going to be talking about it in details. Very important. Bid, operate, and transfer agreements are fantastic, and they are good for both parties. But some of these things must be looked at. So here I have that you must ensure that all the components, the deliverables, the performance standards are well defined and unambiguous. So everything that you need, oh, this is what you want to build, this is the time frame within which you want to build it, these are the specifications. If we are building a road, I don't know how to measure roads, but let's say we are building a 120 centimeters road, for instance. Recently I heard that the governor went to inspect a road and he told the contractors that this is not the width that was approved, so they should redo the road. So they had to redo it according to allegedly. So very important, all those things must be stated. These are the specifications we want, this is the time frame that we want, this is the type of building or construction that we want you to do for us, this is who can do what, who can do what, rather, the performance standards by which we will judge those projects, to see if it's in compliance with our agreement. So those things must be clearly stated. Specifications, everything must be clearly stated. It must also be stated quality control measures that will be put in place, if the government will have, an oversight team that will continue to inspect and enforce quality. Those things must be stated. It must also be stated the budget that will be used, and if there will be any changes. For instance, if you're saying that if this company is saying that this is how much you want to spend on it, if due to market inflation, and the vagaries of the market, if we're going to be spending more, than who is going to cushion that effect, and how are we going to make our money back? All those things must be stated explicitly in the contract, in the build, operate and transfer, in the BOT contract. Also, the financing structure must be stated. So this is how we want to fund the project, this is who will be responsible for this funding, this is how the fundings will be disbursed, this is how we access the funding, what we will do. Also, are we funding just in money, or are we funding in terms of personnel, are we funding in terms of raw materials? All those things must be stated. It must also be stated, if it's a construction project, what company, or if there's going to be a limit on what companies can actually do the construction, and who is going to be approving those. Generally, everything must be stated. And then risk allocations must be stated too, that okay, how do we bear risks associated with this project? Is everything going to be on the contractor, or is everything going to be on the government, or is it going to be shared? In what ratio will the risk be shared? Those things must be stated. Revenue sharing too, if it's of course it's usually always a revenue generating project. So essentially, a build, operate and transfer agreement does not only confer revenue on the company for the period within which they are going to operate, it must also, the government must also be deriving some form of revenue. So for a school hostel that I give an example of now, the benefit that the school is generating would be that its students get accommodation, but not just that, the money, accommodation fee that is going to be paid, what the company will make, there's usually also a ratio, a sharing formula. Say maybe the school will be taking 30% for 20 years or 25 years that we're going to operate the building, and then before the 100% now reverts to the school. Those things are usually always stated. Also, maintenance structure, who will be responsible for the maintenance of the building, and the how often will it be maintained, the periodic maintenance, the maintenance standards, the maintenance pattern, the period, and the standard to which the maintenance will be held, so that at the end of the day, the company does not transfer a dilapidated structure to the government or government entity at the end. So there must be a maintenance clause that shows that, okay, this is the type of maintenance that will be carried out as of compulsion, and this is how often, how often it will be carried out, and this is the standard to which that facility will be held in terms of maintenance. Those things must be stated. The construction schedule too must be stated. Usually you would state that this company, because the company is coming voluntarily to say, we want to build for you, give us land, you are also and that does not mean that the company will now have the latitude to preclude the government from using its land or from awarding the contract to any other ready company. So usually there's a clause that says that if you're not able to build this thing within maybe say 2 years, from the date that we execute this contract, execution means signing the contract. So from the date that we execute this contract, if you are not able to start work, we're going to resign the contract and award it to someone else, or we're going to use our land for something else. So it is not a gift, intervivors. We are not giving you the land. It is still our land. We still have ownership rights. What we're just asking of you is this proposition that you've made to build this for us, build it in good time. So it's not that the company will take the land, maybe they will just do foundation, they go and sleep for 2 years, then they will come back, they will build it to lintel, go and sleep for another 1 year. Meanwhile, the purpose for which the project was executed is languishing. Maybe students year in, year out, they are still suffering from insufficient accommodation. And this company is taking eons to finish the project. No, there's usually a clause that states the period within which the project must be commenced from the signing of the agreement and must be completed. So that period is stated. Note that the completion here is not when it will be transferred, when it will be completed and then put to use, so that the 20 years, the 30 years, the 50 years can start counting, so very important. Also, if you want the years to start counting from execution of the contract, you can discuss that, but I don't think that is best practices, and I don't think that any company will agree to that. Very important. So also, I've talked about the maintenance, the operation of the facility. So if it's a facility that needs maybe a lot of personnel or manpower to operate, it must also be stated in the agreement if the company will be supplying the personnel in totality, or if the government will be able to employ people to work on it, because that's also a plus for the government. If they're able to employ people, maybe they will have a sharing ratio that, okay, government can employ 50% of the staff or 20% of the staff, and they will be staff in this level, or in this cadre of management of the facility, and then the company can employ its own staff, and employ its own staff. To what extent the company can employ its own staff, very important. So those things must be clearly stated. Because the company is going to be generating an income, it's important for them to negotiate a type of agreement that favors them, that makes sure that they have, a level of control, so that they don't lose out in the end. Because usually control from government's end usually has a lot of bureaucracy, so it may slow things down and it may work against the company. So a company lawyer must be able to negotiate a sound agreement for the company to ensure that they have a level of control that will ensure efficiency and that will ensure maximal and beneficial profit making. I say maximal because they must make their money back, beneficial because they must not make money at the expense of the government and its people, to the detriment, now not at the expense, to the detriment of the government and its people. So also the concession period this is the one that sometimes causes issues. So usually in most cases it's 20 to 30 years, BOT agreements 20 to 30 years, but there are some companies that want more so that they can make their money, what they have invested, and then they can make profit separate from their investment, their capital put into the project. Because most times these companies don't have, it's not that they have money that they are not using. They are going to go and get a loan, to fund the project. So, they are battling with loan, with interest rates, so they are battling with returning that and then with making their own actual profit. So usually they want a longer period. But on the part of the government or the government agency, a longer period is not the best, because that means that you will be getting a very used facility at the end of the day. Fine, it's being used for public use, from start, but the management and the maintenance will now turn over to you at a period when the better part of it has been used, and people, the citizen, will expect you to uphold standards, and we know how standards can be when it comes to government side. So if these people that's why I talked about maintenance standards ahead of time. If these people have not maintained it properly, you'll be getting a dilapidated structure at the end of the day. A road filled with bumps, potholes, or you'll be getting, a dilapidated structure if it's a building. So it's important for you to negotiate a concession period. Usually most people just settle into 25 years, but it's usually between 20 and 30 years. So if anyone is asking for more, yes, you have to consider the fact that if you're on the government side, what will you be getting at the end of the day? A dilapidated structure, is that what you want? And then you also have to consider the fact that this agreement must be secured in such a way that the company does not eventually take over the property as the owner of the land and the property. A build, operate, and transfer contract does not confer ownership on the company that is building. So it's important for the agreement to be negotiated in such a way that it will not give such length of time that ownership will now be assumed or presumed by the company, the private entity that is building. So very important. Also, transfer conditions can be negotiated to say that it must be transferred in this quality, in according to these standards. You know how when you rent an apartment, they tell you that don't change the painting in some places. So if you change it, you must transfer it back to the landlord in the original color. So that means you have to repaint the paint you made there when you're going. So also a BOT contract must state the conditions, the standards in which the property will be transferred back to the government entity. I've talked about risk allocation. You have to talk about how they will bear risk. Construction risks are there, operational risks are there, management risks, maintenance risks are there, how the risk will be borne, throughout the entire duration of the contract, those things. The indemnification must also be part. So an indemnification clause, an indemnification clause is a clause that protects a party against damages or loss. So it must be stated that in the event of this certain damage or this certain loss, this is the person that will bear it. This is where this is how it will be relieved, how this party will be relieved of this loss, how this loss or this damage will be palliated. That must also be stated. Then the dispute resolution clause, very important to state if there's a dispute between parties, where will we go to? Are we going to a government mediation center or a multi-door courthouse first before we go to arbitration, or are we going straight to litigation? So the dispute resolution clause. Then the governing law. The governing laws must be stated. So usually the laws governing the state, if it's a state government project or an entity within a country, usually the laws of the land of the federation, the laws of the state will govern. Then the laws of the entity. If you're building with a university now, for a university rather now, the laws of the university must also apply. So, but all the governing laws must be clarified in the contract. Then force majeure, you need to clarify in the case of an act of God. Maybe while you were building, there was an excessive flooding, that flooded the entire area, and it just washes away the entire construction. What's going to happen? Who's going to bear the loss for that? It's an act of God. It's not due to carelessness, and it's not due to anyone's or any man's act. Who's going to bear, that loss, that damage, that delay in construction, and what's going to happen afterwards? So that must be included in the contract. Very important. And then the termination clause must be included. Sometimes, I've reviewed a contract once where it said that if they do not start construction within, I think it was 3 months, within 3 months of signing this agreement, the agreement terminates. So termination clause must be included. So that could include conditions or events that may occur that may lead to the termination. If, for instance, you have built this as a school hostel and we hear that you are now giving out rooms to private citizens, to people that are not even members of the university community, the student members now of the university community, then we terminate this agreement, we take over the building or whatever. So termination clause must state the events that must happen, the things that must occur that will ensure that the contract stands terminated. Very important. So these are some of the most important things that you should consider in the build, operate, and transfer agreement. I must also say, I'm speaking from experience because of a contract that I had looked at sometime, that the government entity should not be lax in negotiating these things, such that you give all the benefits seemingly, to the private entity. because, sometimes there's an apathy from government side to say, it's not my money. Maybe the people that are in those positions today, it's not our money, it's not our land, it's not our property. They want to help us. Let us just give them a free hand. No, don't do that. It's the commonwealth of the society, even though you are in that role today. And also to ensure that when you leave that role, the people that come in your stead will not be thinking, the people that were in this role before, are they wise? Do they have sense? And if you're a lawyer too, so that they will not say, which lawyer negotiated this contract for you people? Does this even make sense? So very important to pay attention to ensure that both parties, they are coming to an equitable agreement, something that benefits both parties, that is not too hard or too harsh. Remember that the private entity is taking the financial burden of immediate expenditure of the government, and the government is taking the financial burden of, in most cases, getting the land to construct that property, that facility of them. So both have contributions to the equation. So lawyers on both sides must make sure that they negotiate what is equitable, and the termination clause, is clear, so that nobody will cry foul or probably run to court and say that they've cheated us. They can't do that. They can't reallocate. They can't reassign, when clearly one party has probably, contravened the contract. Very important. This is what we want to discuss under the negotiation and review of a build, operate, and transfer agreement. I hope you've learned a thing or two. Leave comments in the comment section when you restream, and I will always see you in my very next session or video. Don't forget to subscribe. Visit Batok with Ola today. Look through the channel. We have so many wonderful content for you. Please look at the playlist, look at the live sessions, look at the podcast where we bring other guests on the channel, look at the videos that we upload, the shorts, quick nuggets and wisdom. And I will always see you in my very next video. To-dos.